Okay, so we're diving into Word of Honor today.
Okay.
It's a Chinese show. It's Wuxia. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I was really struck by kind of the beauty of it,
Mm-hmm.
the violence of it, and like these really compelling heroic characters.
Yeah.
But I think for people who aren't familiar with Wuxia, can you just give us like a little bit of a Wuxia 101? What is this genre?
Yeah. So wuxia really, it's a genre that's been around for centuries in Chinese storytelling, and it's all about martial arts heroes,
Okay.
right? So you have these martial arts masters, these incredible fighters, these heroes, and they're often kind of set against this backdrop of a very fantastical world with, beautiful landscapes, kind of these almost magical abilities. And they're always kind of grappling with these themes of honor and duty and good versus evil.
Right.
So it's kind of like if you imagine a kung fu epic,
Right. Got it.
but with like a philosophical side to it.
Okay, so that's kind of broad strokes, like what is the genre?
Yeah.
How does Word of Honor fit into that? And maybe like how does it play with that or expand upon that?
Word of Honor, I think, does a really beautiful job of kind of taking those core wuxia elements,
Okay.
but then adding these layers of kind of depth and complexity to it. So
Yeah.
like you mentioned, the beauty of it,
Yeah.
right? And the beauty is not just like, oh, the scenery's pretty.
Right.
It's really about this idea of wu and wen,
Yeah.
which is this concept in Chinese aesthetics of kind of the martial arts, the wu, and the cultural arts, the wen, being kind of intertwined.
That's it. Okay.
And so the way that the series kind of blends these beautiful visuals with these incredibly choreographed fight sequences,
Right.
it's really kind of showcasing that harmony of a wu and wen. And
Yeah.
so there's this scene
Right.
where Zhu Zishu, who's one of the main characters, he's fighting off all these assassins. And the way he moves, it's like a dance.
Yeah.
It's just so fluid and graceful and beautiful. And that, I think, really kind of exemplifies that blending of wu and wen.
Right. Right. Yeah. And like, one of the things you mentioned is the violence.
Mm-hmm.
And like Wuxia is action packed, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not shying away from that side of things.
No, and Word of Honor certainly doesn't either.
Right.
Like, there is a grittiness to it.
Okay.
And it does have that kind of action-packed element. But I think what's interesting is how it plays with kind of the morality of that violence.
I see. Okay.
So the lines between kind of hero and villain get blurred.
Yeah.
And you're never really quite sure who to root for, who's on the quote-unquote right side.
Right.
And so that's especially true with the character of Wen Kexing, who is this other main character, and he's so charming and charismatic and witty.
Mm-hmm.
But then, he's got this dark past, and he's capable of being incredibly ruthless. And so you spend a lot of the show really trying to figure out,
Okay.
like, where do his loyalties lie? What are his true intentions?
And that kind of brings us to this idea of heroic journeys. Right. And the characters, like you were saying, they're not your typical black and white
Right.
good and evil.
Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about what makes them so unique?
Yeah, so the characters in Word of Honor, I think they're so compelling because they're so deeply flawed,
Okay.
and they're not driven by this like simple sense of righteousness.
Right.
Like Zhu Zishu, he's really haunted by his past, and all he wants is peace.
Okay.
Just to be left alone.
Yeah.
And when Kexing, on the other hand, he's driven by this desire for revenge.
Yeah.
He's had this horrible tragedy in his past, and he's seeking to kind of right those wrongs.
Okay.
And so both of them have made choices that, you could argue are morally questionable,
Mhm.
and they've both kind of sacrificed things and hurt people along the way. But somehow they find this connection with each other,
Right.
and they kind of embark on this journey of redemption together.
So we've talked about kind of Wuxia as a genre. We've talked about, Word of Honor as an
Yeah.
example of Wuxia and like how it plays with some of those tropes.
Yeah.
We've talked about the visuals and the violence
Mhm.
and these kind of complex characters.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you think really stands out about Word of Honor for people who might be interested in watching it?
I think what Word of Honor does so well is it takes this ancient concept of Ixia, of the hero,
Okay.
and it really kind of reinterprets it for a modern audience.
I see.
So it's not just about, being the best fighter or being the strongest. It's about compassion. It's about loyalty. It's about kind of finding the strength to do what's right, even when it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so resonant for viewers today.
Okay, so we've kind of gone on this journey from broad strokes Wuxia
Mm-hmm.
to like really specific things about Word of Honor.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty, the violence, these complicated characters, these
Mhm.
heroic journeys. Like, what do you hope that our listeners will kind of take away from this deep dive?
I hope that they'll realize that Word of Honor is so much more than just a martial arts series.
Okay.
You know, it's really a story about human connection and redemption and finding meaning, even in a world that often feels chaotic and difficult.
Right. And that all plays out against this backdrop of this beautiful genre, these beautiful visuals.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the power of wuxia,
Okay.
right? Like, it's this genre that can be fantastical and action-packed, but it also has this ability to explore these really universal themes that we all grapple with.
This has been a really fun deep dive. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I guess I have one last question for you out there, our listener. How do you think Word of Honor compares to maybe some Western ideas of heroes and heroic journeys? Does it offer us a new perspective on these things? Definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.